In this video, we are going to look at 7 techniques that will help you read faster and improve your reading speed to 2x of whatever it is right now. Now, the first thing that we have to address in this video is reading fast mandatory. Now, you have to understand what do you mean by reading fast. For that, you have to understand one simple thing. And there is a question that we'll start with. Can you guess the number of words that you have to read at the CAT? And this includes all the instructions, the questions, the options, everything that is present across the 3 sections. So pause the video right now, try to take your guess and put it in the comment section below so that you know whether you are on the right track or not. So to answer this question, the number of words that were present at CAT 2023 were 7,000 in total. Now you are expected to read these 7,000 words in a matter of 120 minutes. And of course, you are not going to be able to only read the words. You also have to solve questions, right? So these include data interpretation sets. These include quantitative ability questions that you are expected to sit and solve as well. So 120 minutes is what you are going to get to read these 7,000 words. The average reading speed of an individual is 200 to 250 words per minute, especially when it comes to questions or sentences that they are not very comfortable with. So in totality, if you look at it, 50% of the time that you are going to spend at the CAT is going to be only reading the questions. So 1 hour you are going to spend out of 2 hours just reading the questions, the paragraphs, the options that you are going to have at the CAT. And that is why reading fast will give you that edge when it comes to cracking the CAT. So you have to do one of these things that I have mentioned here. First thing, you either solve very fast, you can read slowly, but you can solve very fast so that you reduce the time that you are spending on actually solving a particular question. Or you can read fast and solve a bit slowly, or you can do a bit of both. Now, which is the thing that is the easiest to create an impact on? You can read faster much easily than you can solve questions fast. And that is why this particular video, which will talk about the techniques that exist when it comes to reading fast. The first technique that we are looking at in this particular context is called skimming/scanning. Now, in terms of the difference between skimming and scanning, it's a bit of a technical term. In terms of skimming, you are trying to understand what exactly is happening in a particular passage. So when you skim through a passage, you are broadly trying to understand what is the topic of the passage, what is the tone of the passage, what exactly is happening in terms of the chronology of the paragraphs that are there, what is it that the author is trying to say, and so on and so forth. Whereas when you are scanning something, it's like going through a phone book. So if you are trying to search your friend's name in a list, or if you are trying to figure out where is your name in a particular list, or you are trying to figure out where are the particular items that are present on a shelf, then that counts as scanning. In terms of scanning, you are trying to find one particular thing which you already know that you are supposed to find. And then you go about eliminating things that do not fit the description. So that is the difference between skimming and scanning. Both the techniques are more or less the same and useful when it comes to the CAT. So one thing that will help you is in terms of skimming a particular passage. Now, what I would suggest you to do is you have to observe this passage for no more than 10 seconds. I have timed this slide so that you don't have to pause the video or rely on arbitrary timers. So have a look at the paragraph that I have put here for 10 seconds. I'll just keep quiet for 10 seconds and see what is it that you have to observe in this particular passage. So have a look at this particular passage right now. So now that you have seen the passage, this was exactly 10 seconds that you had to observe this particular passage. Now you had to observe a few things in this particular passage and be truthful to yourself. Don't go back to the video or pause the video and try to game the system. That is not how things work. Now in this particular context, you have to answer these questions that I am going to ask you. The first question: what was the word that appeared the most number of times in the passage, or what exactly do you think was the passage about? So either of those two questions you can answer. Again, you can put these answers in the comment section below, or you can keep your answers to yourself, because the answer to that question is going to be this: plant behavior. The passage was about the behavior that is exhibited by the plants. So that was the first question. There is another question that I would like to ask you regarding the passage, and that question is: what did the paragraph seem like? So there are 3 options that I'm going to give you here. Was it kind of an information dump wherein there were a lot of facts being stated one after the other? Or was it descriptive and educational? Or was it subjective / argumentative? Now you have to rely on your instincts here. I'm not asking you to go back and read the passage and then figure out the answer to this question. No. On first impression, or what was the first impression that this passage created on you? And what do you think was the objective behind writing this particular passage? Was it just dumping information on you, or was there a positive spin of things and the writer wanted to educate you about something? Or 3, it was about an argumentative or a subjective topic wherein the author was trying to present their views on something that is commonplace knowledge. So the answer to this question again is option 2. It was a descriptive and educational passage. So in this passage, there was some phenomenon that was being described in an interesting manner so that you get educated and you might be able to use it at some point in time. Now you have to understand what exactly are we doing here, and I will show you another sample passage and you have to observe it and answer the questions that I had mentioned earlier. So think about it along the lines in which we discussed these two observations. 1, what was the title of this particular passage, and 2, what was the tone of this particular passage, or what did the paragraph seem like. So again, I will show you the passage. There will be a 10-second timer that will help you go through this particular passage on your own, and then I will share the questions that you are supposed to answer. So have a look at this paragraph that I am showing right now, and this will go on for 10 seconds again. At the end of 10 seconds, you have to be truthful to yourself and close this particular paragraph. So now I have 2 questions here. Again, this is the 2 questions method wherein you are expected to answer these 2 questions whenever there is a paragraph in front of you. The first question is, what was the word that appeared the most number of times in the passage, or what do you think is the topic of the passage? And the second question that you're supposed to answer is, what did the passage seem like? Was it educational? Was it critical? Was it subjective, argumentative, pedantic? There are a lot of ways to describe the tone of a passage. I will have a separate video on how to identify the tone of a particular passage, but for now you can just put the way in which you feel about a particular passage. So there need not be one word that will be descriptive. You can say that this passage seemed as if it was dumping information on me. That's it. Even that is good enough at this point in time. So you have to answer these 2 questions whenever you read a particular passage. If you are able to do it, you will be able to read better. Now, how to read faster? There is the second technique that we have here, which is called skipping. So we already saw what skimming was. This is something that we call skipping. Now, what is it that you're supposed to skip in a particular passage? You think that everything is important. In fact, when you are marking certain things on your textbooks, you would have seen this happening almost every time, that you end up marking everything that is important. And then you don't know which one is really important and what are the things that you are expected to skip. Now in this case, what is it that you're supposed to skip? The first thing is smaller words. So all your articles, a, and, the, small words that are there, small adjectives that are used, which are not very consequential to the grander scheme of things. So unko skip karna hai. The second thing we're talking about is abbreviations. Now you would have seen in the first paragraph that I shared that there was an abbreviation that was involved. Now you need not figure out what exactly is the full form of that particular abbreviation, or what exactly is the language of origin if it's a foreign word, and so on and so forth. So don't get into abbreviations. If something is called VOC, just say that it is VOC and stick to it. Don't try to get into what is VOC and then try to understand what is the meaning of V, what is the meaning of O, what is the meaning of C, and so on. So don't get into those things. Just understand there is an abbreviation that exists. The third thing that you can skip is the names of people or the places where they belong to. So sometimes CAT might make it very difficult for you to understand a particular passage by repeating a technique or a terminology again and again and again without putting a pronoun to it. And that is how they make it difficult. They might introduce the name of a person whom you have never heard about, or a particular phenomenon that you have no idea about. And that is basically how I would like to confuse all of you by saying it again and again and trying to tell you that you do not understand anything in this passage. Now that is communicated subconsciously. So skip the names of people and the places that will be a part of the passage, especially if you are not able to understand what they mean or who they are. The last thing that you are supposed to skip is your pursuit for grammatical errors. A lot of us are inherently critical in nature, and we like to figure out what exactly is the gap or what exactly is the problem or something that is incorrect in a particular passage, and then we try to understand what the passage is trying to say. So we always try to adhere to the letter of the law and not the spirit of the law. So get out of that situation. You are not supposed to proofread the passage. You are supposed to understand what has been already mentioned in the passage. So don't try to find grammatical errors in a passage, because then that will distract you from the grander scale of things. Now, how to implement this? So let's look at a test paragraph again, and let's try to see what we can observe here. Now, this is the paragraph that I have shown here for your benefit. You can just have a look at it, read about it. It is not really a mainstream passage. It's slightly different compared to literature that you might be reading on a day-to-day basis. And if some of you like reading these kind of things, then kudos, you are on the right track to improving your reading speed and doing well at the reading comprehension section of the CAT. So I assume that you have read it right now. If you need more time, you can pause the video, take your time to read this and try to understand what this paragraph or these paragraphs are trying to tell you. Now, as a CAT aspirant, you are supposed to not look at the names that are there, not look at the irrelevant information that is there, not look at additional information that is there. So anything after a dash. So in this case, from my own father to Castro. Now that part is not needed, because touched every aspect of people's lives is good enough. We did not go beyond that and try to talk about the specific people whom they impacted. So in this particular case, we can skip these kind of things. Now, what is it that we are going to skip from the previous bit that we looked at? We are supposed to skip these parts. And now if you look at the passage, if you look at the paragraph here, in 1962, the Soviet leader, now you need not know who Nikita Khrushchev is. You can just skip that name if you are not able to recollect it. Brilliant. Skip that entirely. Supplied Cuba's Fidel Castro. If you don't know about him, you can skip the name again. With long range missiles. What kind of missiles? I don't care. Supplied missiles. That's it. Capable of carrying a nuclear warhead. How does it matter? Capable of carrying a nuclear warhead or not? And almost triggered an all-out war. The presence of weapons this close to Washington DC violated something, the logic that had emerged after the Second World War. And then I don't really need to know anything, because I've understood what this paragraph is trying to tell me. It is trying to tell me that someone supplied someone with missiles, because of which Washington DC was threatened, because it was very close to their place and there is an armed territory that exists. As simple as that. Then we go to the second paragraph and then we read the second paragraph as we are seeing. Now, one thing that you would have not observed here is that because of this skipping technique, we have already reduced the size of the passage or these two paragraphs by 33%. In fact, you can put it in a word counter software and just check for yourself what exactly was the before word count and after word count. And you will see that we have gone down by 33%. 1/3 of the passage we have entirely removed from our eye span, and that's how we can improve our reading speed as well. So make sure that you're not getting stuck on things within the passage and you are skipping things conveniently and just trying to understand what is the spirit of the particular passage. The third technique that we're talking about is a very simplistic technique. It's called point and read. And that's about it. So whenever you are reading something, if you have a physical book, it's very easy for you to put your finger to that book and just move your finger as you are reading that particular thing, because that will tell you that you are progressing in an organized, in a regular manner and you're not getting stuck somewhere. Because if your finger gets stuck, then you also get stuck. And that is something that will give you feedback in terms of how fast or slow you are reading. But when you're reading on a computer screen, sometimes it might not be useful or it might not really give you that kind of feedback that you would get from a physical book. So what you can do in this context is, again, there are a lot of ways of doing this. You can put your finger on the screen and do it as well, or slightly behind the screen and try to track what is it that you're reading, or you can do it subconsciously. You can also use the mouse cursor to just move ahead in terms of your paragraph or which is the sentence that you are on, and that will help you point and read in a better manner. So the more regular the movement of your cursor is, the more smooth you are in terms of reading things. So use your cursor properly. Don't just keep your mouse and sit back and try to read something. That will generally not help you read in a regular or a smooth, fast manner. The fourth technique that we're talking about here is called reading speed greater than talking speed, or it is called eliminating subvocalization. So whenever you are reading something, you will be faster. But whenever you are talking about something, you will be slightly slower. So what you can do as an exercise just to test this theory is you can just take a book and you can read it on your own, and then you can try reading it to someone else. You will see that you are much faster when you are reading it to your own than speaking it out aloud. And that is where subvocalization comes into the picture. So that is where you are enunciating words. You are trying to pronounce each and every word. You are trying to read all the in-between smaller words that are there, which will affect your reading speed. Now you have to avoid subvocalization or pronouncing words within your mind as well. Now how do you avoid it? The first thing you can do is you can be mindful of what you are doing, what you are reading, and you can avoid these kind of subvocalization phenomena. But what you can also do in this context is, and this is a technique that is recommended by a lot of speed readers, you can create distractions for yourself. You can hum a tune to yourself when you are reading a particular passage. Now, although it might seem slightly distracting and you might wonder, if you are humming a tune, then how will you be able to read something? But of course, your brain is used to creating these kind of distractions so that it can focus on the reading part and not on the speaking part. So you can hum a tune. A lot of people count numbers when they are reading things so that your mouth or your vocalizing part of the brain is occupied doing something else and is not distracting your reading side of the brain. So if you are very bad at not moving your lips and you move your lips when you are reading something, this is a technique that can help you. The fifth technique that we are talking about in this particular context is to avoid regressing. Now, this is something that even I have maintained a lot of times whenever we are solving reading comprehension passages. So I always tell my students to not go back in the passage. A lot of time it so happens that you start reading something, you read the first paragraph, then you go back to the first paragraph. And you are like, no, I was distracted for a bit. Let me read it again so as to get a better understanding of things. It does not really help you in any regard, because if you keep on reading and rereading, you are giving your brain that leeway that it's okay to reread something. So the first time when you are reading something, it's okay to be casual. And that is not the attitude that is going to help you read faster. So avoid regressing at any cost. Even if you don't know what you have read, even if you're not confident at all, you have to trust your brain and understand that it will make sense in the long run. So the first step is you have to be mindful, you have to be focused when it comes to reading a particular passage. Nothing that is scientific about it. You have to be mindful, you have to be present in the moment. The second step, you have to trust your brain to make sense of the bigger picture. If you are reading a 300-page novel, your brain is not going to remember each and every detail that was present on page 1, page 2, page 3 and so on. But at the end of 300 pages, it will tie all the loose ends together. It will tell you, oh, this was what happened earlier, then this happened, and finally this was the resolution. So your brain is capable of stitching together things that you would have read here and there and might not be able to recall entirely, but otherwise you should be fine. And step 3, never look back. As is the case with any horror movie, you have to keep looking forward, you have to keep going forward in terms of reading, and you should never go back to the paragraph that you have just finished. It's okay to punish your brain at this point in time, but let your brain get into the habit of not going back and reading it properly the first time around. The next technique that we are going to talk about is called eclectic reading. Now, some of you might not really know the word eclectic, but by now you would have realized what is it that I'm talking about. You have to read from a diverse set of sources and genres. So the more your diversity in terms of comfort with various topics, the better off you will be when it comes to the CAT. What all topics to read? You have to focus on social topics, cultural topics that talk about civilizations, cultures that existed, cultures other than the ones in your native place or native country. History, not just Indian history, but global history. Literature, not just Indian literature, but global literature. Not just literature from this era, but from the previous era as well. Art, legal topics, all these topics are very important, especially when you are reading casually. So make sure that you are reading all these genres and not focusing on your strengths, because everyone is good at entertainment, everyone is good at sport, everyone is good at science and technology, and these come very easily to most. So focus on topics that are beyond the topics that you usually read, so that you are not surprised on the day of the CAT. And the last technique that we are going to talk about is practice, and yes, even more practice. You have to practice things mindfully. You have to know what is it that you're going for, and you have to be you have to have that intent when it comes to reading fast. If you don't have intent when you're reading, you will definitely not be able to do it on a regular basis. So what you can do in this regard, you have to read quickly and you have to try to summarize the passage. So let's say you are looking at articles from the Aeon, or you are looking at articles from the Economist, or you are looking at articles from the Hindu, let's say. What you can do is you can read quickly and you can try to summarize the passage on your own. Typically the articles in Aeon will have the length mentioned at the top. So it would tell you that, okay, this is a 3000 word article. It is fine to read a 3000 word article, but if you are looking at a reading speed of 400, 500 words per minute, to read a 3000 word article, you need to spend 6 minutes on that particular article. So make sure that you are giving yourself no more than 5 to 6 minutes to read that entire thing. One. The second thing is you have to be able to summarize the passage as soon as you have finished reading that particular passage. Now, who will you summarize it to? How will you know if your summary is right or not? And that is basically where we use technology. Use generative AI, use ChatGPT, and ask ChatGPT that this was the article that you have to summarize, and summarize it in 100 words. And see if your summary matches the summary that has been generated by the AI. And the closer you are to that summary, the better off you will be in terms of improving your reading speed. In fact, to test whether you have understood everything correctly or not, you can ask ChatGPT to design some questions for you. Ask ChatGPT to create a quiz of 5 questions on the passage that you would have read. And ChatGPT is definitely not going to create very complicated questions. It is going to create factual questions. And you can answer those questions. If you get 3, 4, or 5 out of 5, you should be very happy about your performance. And the more you practice these techniques, the better off you will be in terms of improving your reading speed. And most importantly, the word that I have not mentioned throughout this video, comprehension. Now, if you like this video, do consider giving it a thumbs up. If you have some queries regarding any of the techniques, feel free to put it in the chat below. And in case you like the channel, stay subscribed to the channel, share it with all your friends, and make sure that our word reaches out to as many aspirants as is possible.